the truth always finds a way to come out. 15 years of keeping up the perfect facade, and it only took one single moment for everything to collapse. Sarah's face froze in shock when Tyler said those words. Chairman Parker. 2 words that exposed the lie I had carefully maintained for more than a decade. Subscribe to the channel, and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. I'm Nathan Parker, and until tonight, in my family, I was just the failure of a brother. The eternal disappointment. The one who hopped from one job to another without ever managing to stick with anything. While Sarah, my older sister, built a brilliant career as a marketing executive, I was the uncomfortable topic at family dinners. Nathan is looking for new opportunities, my mother would say with that embarrassed smile whenever someone asked about me. Sarah never hid her disdain. Just yesterday, when I told her that I had lost my last job as a junior analyst, she laughed. It wasn't a polite little laugh, it was a genuine laugh, followed by a pat on my shoulder. You're never going to change, are you? 34 years old and still haven't found your way. She looked at our parents with that look of superiority. At least one of us actually made it in life. It all started when I was 19, in my second year of college. While my classmates partied, I was working on an algorithm to predict market trends. It wasn't perfect, but it worked surprisingly well. My economics professor could hardly believe it when I showed him the results. This is extremely valuable, Nathan. You should patent it. I did more than that. I started small by investing the savings I had built up working in restaurants. The algorithm worked. In 6 months, I tripled my initial capital. In a year, I had enough money to open my own investment company. Sarah was finishing her MBA at the time, always boasting about her important connections and prestigious internships. When I told her about my project, she rolled her eyes. Algorithms. The financial world is all about connections, Nathan. You don't know anyone. Without a famous last name, without high-class contacts, you're not going anywhere. Those words changed everything. I decided right then that I would build my empire quietly, without anyone knowing. Not out of revenge, but to prove to myself that I could do it on my own merits, without the connections that Sarah so highly valued. Parker Global Investments grew fast. I kept my name out of the spotlight, using a complex corporate structure that hid the true owner. To the world, the CEO was Jonathan Morgan, my right-hand man, and the only friend who knew the truth. Meanwhile, I maintained everyday jobs as a front. The ultimate irony came when Sarah started dating Tyler Robinson. At the first family gatherings, he mentioned that he worked for a major investment firm. Which company? I asked, already dreading the answer. Parker Global. It's a powerhouse in the market, but I bet you've never heard of it, Sarah replied for him, in that condescending tone. I kept my cool, just nodding. Tyler was a promising executive, managing one of the most profitable departments in my company. Sarah was literally dating my employee while mocking my supposed ignorance of the financial market. The engagement party was held at one of Manhattan's most luxurious hotels. Sarah made sure to point out that Tyler had booked the venue using his privileged contacts. In reality, the hotel belonged to an investment fund controlled by my company. The ballroom was packed. Our proud parents, Sarah's friends, Tyler's colleagues. I stayed discreetly in a corner, observing. During the toast, Sarah didn't miss the chance. I'm so happy that at least one member of the Parker family will have their name associated with corporate success. Polite laughter rippled through the room. I saw my father give an uncomfortable smile. That's when Tyler, already a bit tipsy from the champagne, saw me in the corner and walked over. Chairman Parker, what an honor to see you here. I didn't know you knew Sarah. The silence was immediate and complete. Sarah froze, glass in hand. My parents exchanged confused looks. Chairman? Sarah asked, her smile faltering. Tyler, realizing his mistake, went pale. You are Nathan Parker? Nathan Parker? Yes, it's me, I replied calmly, while all eyes converged on me. But that's impossible, Sarah stammered, her glass trembling in her hand. You can't be. You just lost your job as an analyst. Jonathan, who I had discreetly invited, stepped forward. Nathan is the founder and chairman of Parker Global Investments. It's been that way from the start. The expression on Sarah's face was indescribable, a mix of shock, confusion, and growing horror as she realized all the implications. My mother was the first to recover. Nathan, is it true? All this time? My father stayed silent, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Guests started whispering. Some were already pulling out their phones, probably checking the news about the mysterious Parker Global. Why did you never tell us? Sarah finally asked, her voice breaking. I suppose no one ever asked. I replied simply. Everyone was too busy assuming I was a failure. The engagement party ended abruptly after my revelation. Tyler tried to keep up appearances, but the damage was done. Sarah ran to the restroom, my parents were stunned, and I slipped out discreetly with Jonathan before things got any worse. The next day, the news spread like wildfire. Secret billionaire exposed. The man behind Parker Global Investments. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, investors, old college mates. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to Nathan Parker. The most ironic part, my secretary told me our HR department had received over 100 resumes from Parker family members in the following 24 hours. Distant cousins I barely knew were now claiming a close relationship. Uncles who had never spoken to me sent emails about amazing business opportunities. "What are you going to do now?" Jonathan asked as we reviewed the press statements in my corner office on the top floor. "Honestly, I don't know. I never planned for the day after," I admitted. And it was true. For 15 years I was obsessed with building something grand away from my family's prying eyes. I never really thought about what would happen when the truth came out. There was something almost comforting about my double life. The contrast between board meetings in the morning and family dinners at night, where I was treated as the problematic kid. "The shareholders are worried," Jonathan continued. "Our market value has fluctuated 3% since yesterday. We need to stabilize the narrative." But while he talked about corporate press releases and PR strategies, my mind was somewhere else. I remembered my father's expression when the truth was revealed. Not anger or shock, but something more complex. It was almost like grief, as if he was suddenly confronting 15 years of mistaken judgments. My personal cell phone buzzed again. It was Sarah, for the 5th time that day. I let the call go. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. The real storm wasn't in the financial markets or the press. It was in the uncomfortable silences and unspoken words that now hung between me and the people closest to me. That night, I went back to my apartment. Not the modest studio my family thought I rented, but the penthouse on the Upper East Side that was my real residence. As I gazed out at the city through the panoramic window, I realized there was something liberating about no longer having to lie, but there was also something terrifying about the vulnerability that came with that freedom. For 15 years, I had protected myself behind a carefully constructed facade. Now I was exposed, not just as billionaire Nathan Parker, but as a man who felt the need to hide his true identity from his own family. Looking out over a lit-up Manhattan that night, I understood that the hardest part was only just beginning. The markets would eventually stabilize. The press would find a new story to chase. But my family? Those wounds would take much longer to heal, if they ever did. 3 days later, I agreed to meet my father for coffee. I chose a discreet spot, away from the fancy restaurants where I held business meetings. He arrived punctually, looking somehow smaller, less imposing than he had always seemed during my childhood. "Your office is impressive," he remarked after an initial silence. "I walked by the front desk and they said you were out. Sorry about that. I had to rearrange a few appointments." Another silence fell. My father stirred his coffee without really drinking it. "Why, Nathan?" he finally asked softly. "Why hide all of this from us?" I took a deep breath. That question had haunted me for days. At first, I guess it was to prove something to myself. Then, it became easier to keep it secret than to explain why I started it in the first place. "Was it because of that time in your sophomore year? When I said you were wasting your time with that computer project?" The memory came back vividly. I, eagerly showing off my initial algorithm, and my father averting his eyes to watch a baseball game, saying I needed to stop dreaming and start building a real career like your sister. "It wasn't just that," I replied honestly. "It was a whole buildup of things." My father nodded slowly. "I always thought you needed a stronger push. Sarah was always self-motivated, determined from a young age. You were different, more introspective. I thought pressure was what you needed." He finally looked me in the eye. I was wrong. That simple, direct admission completely disarmed me. In every scenario I had imagined for this conversation, I never considered that my father would just admit his mistake. "I built a company valued in billions," I said, almost defensively. "I turned an algorithm I developed in college into one of the country's biggest investment firms. And I never knew," my father replied, a sad smile forming on his face. "I missed out on being proud of my son for 15 years. Those words hit me harder than I expected. All this time, I thought I was protecting myself from their judgment, when in reality, I was also depriving them of the chance to witness my success. The next day, it was my mother's turn. She insisted on coming to my apartment, the real one, and nearly broke down when she saw how big and elegant it was. "You've been living here all this time?" she asked, touching the furniture as if checking to see if it was real. "For the most part over the last 8 years," I confirmed. "Before that, I had a smaller place in the village." She walked over to the window, taking in the view. "How many times have I called worried, thinking you could barely pay the rent for that tiny apartment?" "Many," I admitted, feeling a pang of guilt. She turned, tears in her eyes. "Do you know what my biggest fear was all these years? That you'd never find stability, that you'd always be struggling financially." She let out a sad laugh. "And all this time, you could have bought our whole neighborhood." Our conversation was more emotional than the one I'd had with my father, full of questions about my daily life, my habits, the people I'd met. She wanted to recover the 15 years of reality she'd lost, filling in the gaps of the fictional narrative I had built. "Sarah is devastated," she eventually mentioned. "She hasn't left her room since the party." "She'll be okay," I replied, colder than I intended. "She's always been your biggest fan, you know?" my mother said, surprising me. "When we were kids, before everything started competing, she always said you were the smartest in the family." That caught me off guard. In my memories, Sarah had always been the antagonist, the sister who relished in my failures, who built her identity in opposition to my supposed shortcomings. The idea that she once admired me seemed impossible to reconcile with the reality I had known for so long. The conversation with Sarah was, as expected, the hardest. She came to my office, actually not to my apartment, a week after the revelation. Tyler had taken temporary leave from work, and the wedding plans were officially under review. "Impressive," she said, looking around the spacious room overlooking Central Park. "You really built all of this?" "Yes," I replied simply. She walked slowly, examining the details. The awards discreetly displayed on a shelf, the photographs with important figures in the financial world, the neatly stacked annual reports. "For 15 years, she finally said, I laughed at you. I put down your choices. I made jokes at your expense at family dinners. And all this time, that was who you were." She gestured to the office. "Why, Nathan? Why let me humiliate you over and over when you could have just ended it all?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her, for perhaps the first time in years. Her eyes were puffy from crying, her normally impeccable posture slumped. The confident, dominant Sarah I had known seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone vulnerable and uncertain. "In the beginning, it wasn't intentional," I explained. "When I started succeeding, I decided to keep it a secret to prove to myself that I could do it alone, without family connections. Then, when the company grew, I think I got used to the dynamic between us. A dynamic where I was the arrogant villain," she said bitterly. I couldn't disagree. For years, I had seen Sarah as the villain of my story, the sister who reveled in my failures, who used my apparent mistakes to shine even brighter. "All this time," she continued, sitting heavily in an armchair, "I built my identity around being the successful one. I worked 70 hours a week to secure my position. I sacrificed relationships, my health, everything to prove my worth." She looked straight at me. "And now I find out that my little brother, whom I sincerely thought was a loser, is literally a billionaire. Do you have any idea what that does to everything I thought about myself?" Her bluntness took me by surprise. I had never really considered how my revelation might affect Sarah's self-image, how it could destabilize the foundation upon which she had built her identity. "I never planned to humiliate you at your engagement party," I finally said. "It was an accident." "It was the worst moment of my life," she admitted. "Tyler is heartbroken. He doesn't know if I still want to marry him now that I know he's your subordinate." She almost spat the last word. "Tyler is a talented executive," I replied honestly. "He earned his position on his own, not because of connections. That should mean more, not less." Sarah fell silent for a moment, processing my words. During yesterday's department meeting, everyone was looking at me differently. The same colleagues who used to treat me as an equal now treat me differently because I'm the sister of Chairman Parker. Her voice trembled slightly. 15 years building my own reputation, and now I'm just a footnote in your story. That hit me like a punch in the gut. I had been so focused on my own narrative of overcoming obstacles that I never considered how my revelation might destabilize the career Sarah had legitimately built. "That's not true," I said, softer than I had ever spoken to her in years. "Your work speaks for itself. No one can take that away from you." "Do you really believe that?" she asked, a rare vulnerability in her tone. Or are you just being kind to the pathetic sister who made fun of you for years while secretly running the world? I'm not running the world, I said with a small smile. Just a mid-sized investment company. She laughed. A genuine laugh, though fragile. It was a sound I hadn't heard in a long time. A mid-sized company valued in billions, she corrected, wiping away a tear. God, you were always the smart one. Mom was right. What? I asked, surprised. When we were kids, she used to say you saw things that no one else did. I hated it when she said that. Sarah got up and walked to the window. I guess I was afraid she was right. In that moment, I realized that Sarah and I were more alike than we'd ever admit. Both driven by the fear of not being enough. Both building facades to hide our insecurities. The difference was that my facade hid success, while hers hid a constant fear of failure. What happens now? She finally asked. It was a question I didn't have an answer to. For 15 years, I had lived for the moment of revelation. I had never planned for the day after. 3 months passed since the engagement party revelation. The initial media storm had calmed down, although headlines would still occasionally pop up about the secret billionaire of Manhattan. Parker Global Investments, after a brief turbulence, stabilized and even strengthened its market position. The peculiar story of its founder had, ironically, boosted investor confidence. The numbers last quarter exceeded projections by 12%, Jonathan informed me during our weekly meeting. Apparently, the mystery surrounding the company only increased our appeal. But the real adjustments happened away from the financial markets and boardrooms. The family dynamics I had known all my life were undergoing a profound transformation. My father, always reserved and sparing with praise, now called regularly to discuss business. At first, his attempts to get involved seemed forced. A man desperately trying to make up for lost time. But as the weeks went by, our conversations became more natural. I'm thinking of expanding my construction company, he mentioned during one of our lunches. I've always wanted to enter the commercial real estate market, but never had enough capital. At any other moment, I would have taken it as a subtle plea for money. But something had changed between us. I saw in his eyes not a man asking for favors, but a father genuinely sharing his dreams with his son. I have a few contacts in the real estate sector, I replied, realizing it was the first time I was openly sharing my professional resources with him. We can explore some possibilities if you like. My father's smile, cautious, hopeful, made me realize that we were building something new between us. It wasn't the relationship we had before, nor something entirely new, but a more honest version of what could have been over all those years. My mother found her own way of processing the truth. She insisted on visiting my office, getting to know my team, and understanding my daily work. There was something moving in her methodical effort to fill in the 15-year gap of her son's life. I always knew you were special, she told me one day over tea in my apartment. I just never imagined all of this. I'm not that special, Mom, I replied, uncomfortable with her newfound admiration. I just had an idea that worked. It's not just about the money, Nathan, she responded, surprising me with her insight. It's the determination, the vision. Building something like this takes way more than a good idea. It was the first time I truly felt that my mother saw me, not as the troubled son who needed guidance, nor solely as the newly discovered billionaire, but as the complex person caught between those extremes. The biggest surprise, however, came from Sarah. After our initial conversation in the office, she disappeared for a few weeks. Tyler confirmed that she had taken leave from work and was reassessing a few things. I worried that our revelation had caused irreparable damage. Then, on a Wednesday morning, she showed up at the reception of Parker Global. "Your sister is here," my assistant announced, looking slightly confused. Sarah entered the office with that determined expression I knew so well, the look she had when she was about to propose something important. "I want to work here," she announced straight away. I blinked, sure I had misunderstood. "You want what?" "I resigned from my position at Meridian," she explained, referring to the marketing company where she worked. "And I want a job here." "Sarah, you don't need to—" "It's not what you think," she interrupted. "I don't want a board-level position or anything you wouldn't give me if I weren't your sister. I want to start from scratch, in the marketing department, doing what I know, without any privileges." I studied her face, looking for signs of bruised pride or resentment. But what I saw was genuine determination. "Why?" I finally asked. She sighed, sitting in the chair right in front of me. "Because for the first time in my life, I want to build something on my own merit, knowing exactly what I'm up against." She paused. "All these years, I thought I was winning a race. when in reality you were playing a completely different game. Now I want a chance to play on the same board. People are going to talk, I warned. They'll say you got the job because you're my sister. Let them talk, she replied with a half smile. I recently learned that what other people think matters a lot less than I imagined. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Sarah started the following week as a junior marketing manager, several rungs below her previous position. To my surprise, she embraced the challenge with a humility and determination I had never seen before. 3 weeks later, Sarah and Tyler announced that they were going ahead with the wedding, though on a much smaller scale than originally planned. Tyler had gotten over the initial shock, and after several honest conversations with Sarah, decided that he loved the person, not her position or her connections. He said he fell for me, not for the successful sister of the boss, Sarah told me with an ironic smile. Although he did admit that the whole situation is incredibly weird. He's a good man, I commented. I've always respected his work at the company. Imagine, she replied, if I hadn't been so arrogant about my career compared to yours, maybe I wouldn't have been so fixated on finding a successful boyfriend to complete the image. We could have saved everyone a lot of drama. This new version of Sarah, more thoughtful and able to laugh at her own flaws, was so different from the competitive sister I'd known, that I sometimes wondered if the revelation had truly transformed her, or just revealed a side of her that had always been there beneath the perfect facade. In truth, I realized that we were all going through a similar process, not a complete transformation, but a peeling away of the layers of pretense and expectations that had defined our family for so long, as if the truth about my life had, somehow, given us all permission to be more authentic. A year after the revelation, our family gathered for dinner at my house. Not in the ostentatious Manhattan penthouse, but in a more modest home I bought on the outskirts of the city. A place chosen not to impress, but to welcome. Sarah and Tyler arrived first, bringing wine. Their wedding had taken place 6 months earlier, an intimate ceremony that stood in stark contrast to the extravagance originally planned. Sarah now led her own marketing team at Parker Global, having earned a promotion recognized even by the most skeptical colleagues. My parents arrived next. My father, reinvigorated by a partnership with one of the company's investment funds, was expanding his construction business into commercial projects. My mother had discovered an unexpected passion for philanthropy, helping run a foundation I created to support financial education in low-income communities. This house is much cozier than that huge apartment, my mother commented as she explored the living room. It suits you more, Sarah added, surprising me. Less Chairman Parker, more Nathan. While we prepared the table for dinner, I observed the natural interactions among everyone, the jokes without malice, the genuine conversations. There was no more that underlying tension that had characterized our gatherings for so many years. The subtle comparisons, the biting remarks, the silent discomfort. It had all been replaced by something I can only describe as authenticity. Cheers, my father proposed once everyone was seated. To the Parker family, version 2.0. We laughed and raised our glasses. The phrase was simple, but perfectly captured what we all felt. We were the same people, but changed. Transformed not only by the unveiled truth, but by the shared journey we had embarked on since then. After dinner, while everyone else chatted in the living room, I slipped outside to the terrace. The night was clear, the stars visible despite the distant city lights. Sarah joined me a few minutes later, carrying 2 glasses of wine. Deep in thought? She asked, handing me one of the glasses. Just reflecting, I replied with a smile. We sat in silence for a moment, taking in the view. It was a comfortable silence, free of the weight of competition or the bitterness that once hung between us. You know, she began, for years I imagined what the perfect moment of revenge would be against everyone who doubted me. In my fantasies, it always involved an impressive position, public recognition, maybe even a magazine cover. I know that fantasy all too well, I admitted. But you had that moment, she observed. That perfect moment of revenge at your engagement party. And you know what I realized after the dust settled? It didn't change anything fundamental. I considered her words. How do you mean? The revelation shocked everyone, exposed the lies, turned our family upside down. But in the end, it wasn't what truly mattered. She turned to face me. What transformed our family wasn't that moment of truth. It was what we chose to do afterward, how we decided to rebuild. Her words hit deep. For 15 years, I lived for that moment of revelation, imagining it as the climax of my story. But Sarah was right. The true growth, the real transformation, came afterward. In the awkward lunches that followed, in the hard conversations, in the daily decision by all of us to try again. Differently. You know what's ironic? I commented. I spent half my life hiding my success, because I thought it was the only way to prove my true worth. That without money and prestige, no one would ever respect me. And I spent half my life flaunting my achievements because I believed the same thing, Sarah replied. Two sides of the same coin. We laughed at the simplicity of that observation. How could two siblings take such different paths, yet be driven by the same deep-seated fear of not being enough? I think in the end, I concluded, the real revenge against those who doubted us isn't about humiliating them or proving they were wrong. It's about outgrowing the need for revenge, Sarah finished my thought. It's about transforming broken relationships into something genuine. I raised my glass in a silent toast, and she did the same. Below us, visible through the living room window, I could see our parents and Tyler engaged in lively conversation. An imperfect family, marked by years of misunderstandings and unmet expectations, yet also a family in the process of healing. 15 years of keeping up a facade, and now, finally, living without masks. The secret billionaire was no longer a secret, and ironically, it had made me more human, more connected, more real. I discovered that true success wasn't in the numbers in my bank account, or the power I wielded in the corporate world. It was in this moment, in the ability to be seen and fully accepted by the people who mattered. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. The truth, with all its initial pain and discomfort, had set us free. And as I watched the stars with my sister by my side, I felt a sense of wholeness that no financial achievement had ever given me. Some truths take time to come out, but when they finally do, they can transform everything.